talk about regenerative farming next, okay? Principles, from my perspective, and you're going to hear a lot of principles from different groups. So these are the principles of regenerative. These are the principles of soil health. So there a lot of times they're just repackaging the same information, and so I'm going to repackage the same information and spit it out at you. So yeah, we'll be talking about that for the next, I don't know, maybe hour or so. Yes, we already covered this. There are many, it's a beautiful place, but there's many problems going on right now. Climates are changing, a lot of agrochemical pollution. I have 5 of my nieces and nephews, and we don't have big families, but 5 of them have severe autism. Human health problems, we're seeing stuff we've never seen before, and it's related to how we're producing our food. Declines in biodiversity. Civil unrest. What's a quick way to start a revolution? Starve some people for a while. But what's so exciting about this is that the farmers are leading the charge. And this has been a real revolution in my own career, and is just seeing how these farmers are really changing things. And it's not just in one system, it's not just in one area, it's all over the planet. Right? And they're growing things using all kinds of different practices, but they're all unified in some core principles. Okay? They're calling this regenerative agriculture. And regenerative agriculture to me means, well, let's talk about that. So regenerative ag, so these are the 2 outcomes of most food production systems, right? You want money and you want food. Okay? And this is how we've designed our business models within farming for a long time. What regenerative ag does is it refocuses. What they say is that we focus on soil health and conserving biodiversity, and that profits and nutrient-dense food come along with those things. So by reprioritizing, by refocusing what our goals are, suddenly we become a more profitable operation. Okay. It doesn't mean you can ignore the profit and the food production, but so what? In the very definition of what I view regenerative agriculture is by focusing on conserving soil, promoting soil health, and conserving biodiversity, you're growing nutrient-dense food profitably. Okay. How do you do that? How do you do these 2 things? You reduce disturbance and you increase diversity. What's a disturbance in your farm? Tillage. What else? Agrochemicals. Right. How do you increase diversity? Biodiversity. Plants, microbes, animals, fungi, all of these things, right? You grow, if you build it, they will come, right? But diversity, it transcends just that. It also includes, people in your community and different revenue streams in your farm and all of those aspects of it. Those are all important aspects of diversity. So what does a regenerative farm look like? Because that's what everybody, we're gonna label it now. We're gonna label it, and then people will know exactly what regenerative farming is. And I don't think we're there yet. Why? Because a regenerative farm looks totally different depending on where you're living and what you're doing. Okay? So environmental differences, regional differences, it's an adaptive process, these farms are. They're dynamic. They respond to things like climate, rainfall, soil, available market, species. Maybe you can grow clovers. This is Alsike clover on your farm. Maybe this works as a cover crop. So it depends on what your environment is. Maybe you're able to produce perennial crops in your... Maybe you've got the opportunities for integrating livestock. Maybe you've got labor that can help you with these things. So the practices on different regenerative farms vary substantially. But what unifies them are principles. Okay? And those do not vary. Here's a good constraint. This was May 1st in my backyard. That constrains what we can grow that year, doesn't it? Principle number 1. Eliminate tillage, or recognize the damage that tillage does and try to compensate for that any way you can. It's not easy. This is almond production. This is California. This is the Central Valley of California. This is where we send our bees. That's not even soil anymore.
That's dirt.
Yep, it's dust. Most of your fruits and vegetables grown in the Central Valley are grown on chemotherapy. It's the only way that they can produce, right?
That's right.
For every almond that you're producing, it requires 1 to 2 gallons of water. Just one nut. They're growing it in this. We've known the damage that tillage causes for almost 100 years. Have you guys read Plowman's Folly? Yeah. If you haven't, you need to get that book. It's available free online as a PDF. This guy explains the soil health movement in 1943. Everything that we're trying to promote right now was already known and explained in gross detail back in 1943. So tillage, the reason that tillage is so problematic is that it has huge effects on both soil health and the biology of the system. If I had to choose between spraying an herbicide and tilling the soil, I'm going to pick the herbicide. Luckily, those aren't our only 2 options, right? Those aren't our only 2 options. Why? The only studies that have ever been done that I've ever seen have shown that tillage has a longer-term negative impact on biology in the system than herbicide use does. Why? Why do we till? Well, I got to get into that field earlier. I got weeds, right? I've got weeds, I got to control them. I got to get better seed-to-soil contact. I've heard all of these different arguments, and all of them were dispelled back in 1943. If you design your system correctly. Does not mean that there are not practical constraints to avoiding tillage, right? Tillage is a tool. But it needs to be a much, much higher priority in designing these systems. Tillage affects the soil physical properties and structural properties of the soil. It increases erosion, reduces water infiltration and the water balance of your soil. It reduces the organic matter. This is the money that drives your farm, right there. Have you guys ever read Dirt by David Montgomery? That's another really good book. He's actually from up in Washington. Good friend of mine. Essentially, he goes back through human history and shows how throughout human history, whenever you see the downfall of a major civilization, Rome, the Sumerians, the Aztecs, all of these folks, directly before the downfall of that society was they absolutely depleted their soil resources through tillage. Right now, we are losing 4 millimeters per year in the U.S., but that's over the past century, what, maybe even longer? That adds up to, feet of soil. The United Nations now estimates that we only have 60 years left of topsoil on the planet. You think we should learn from history yet? That's tillage. So how do you rebuild it? How do you grow soil? Biology. Right there. Biology. Charles Darwin was actually one of the first people who really blew the lid off of worms, right? And what he showed is that just how profound and huge of an effect that worms have in terms of soil generation. And he did it by measuring the soil generation by worms in his own backyard. And it was huge. It's just absolutely staggering just how much or how important worms are in that. Not just one species. I estimate from our own insect sampling in the soil and work with different arthropods and vertebrates, we can get up to 1 billion insects per acre, 500,000 worms per acre. That's just the living stuff. That's 0.5% of soil organic carbon right there. That's just, and that's the live stuff. Think about all the generations of critters that are dead in that soil. I mean, and that's something you can manipulate, right? That's not something that just, doesn't come in a jug. Yeah. So first, tillage depletes the organic matter of your soil, and then it also knocks back your ability to rebuild it. That's why tillage is so damaging. Because it kills the biology. It disrupts communities, and it actually kills the animals and plants that live there, and then it changes the soil environment, making it difficult for a lot of these organisms to come back. This was work done by Ryan Schmid. He was a master's student with me, went to get his PhD at Kansas State. Now he's going to be one of our first research scientists. He starts next month. I can't wait to have him back. Here he is on the Great Wall of China. Cornfields, pastures, prairies. This is the number of insect and plant species in each of these habitats. Tillage, these are all tilled cornfields here. They had 24% of the species that used to be in these ancestral habitats. It's a lot of diversity that's been lost. Okay? A lot of diversity. This has been a tool, though, for managing pests for a long, long time. I even wrote fact sheets for the Minnesota Department of Agriculture as a graduate student. Everything that I learned as a scientist was, if you've got a soil pest, kill the hell out of it, and it kills it. So, Brett Steiner, back in at Ohio State, published a wonderful review article where he looked at all of the literature of the day, and he looked at whether or not the study said that the tillage actually controlled the pests that they were targeting. And in 72% of the cases for all of this published research, tillage had either no effect or actually enhanced pest populations. That flies in the... Why do we still teach this? Why? Worms, this was a brilliant meta-analysis. Tons of work must have gone into this. They reviewed hundreds of studies throughout history and looked at all of the times, or they compared all of the comparisons of conventional tillage versus conservation tillage and its effects on worms. Okay, what tillage does is it reduces, by stopping tilling or reducing it, they increase worm abundance, the number of worms, by 130%, and the weight of worms in that soil by up to 200%. That's where your soil is coming from. Okay. So when I present this, especially at no-till meetings, they're like, okay, the farmers are ready to make a change. All right, I love this regenerative idea. I love it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to start this year. All right, here we go. And then they come back, hey, wait a minute. I tried no-till. I dipped my toe in. I tried no-till. Didn't work. I'm done with this regenerative crap. It's like, no, going no-till is just one aspect of this system. And you've got to adopt a systems approach. Simply adopting one or two practices of a regenerative system is not going to get us where we need to go. Rolf Dirks does a great job of explaining this in this paper. What else is needed? Roots. Principle number 1 is eliminate tillage. Principle number 2 is never leave bare soil. Where does the energy come from on your farm? Is it a diesel can? It's the sun.
Sun.
The sun. How do you harness the power of the sun?
Solar panels.
Photosynthesis.
Plants. It's the only way.
They're the best solar panels out there.
That's right. Plants. Number one, they reduce erosion. They increase the soil organic matter. They increase the ability of your soil to support the biology that then drives that system. Why do we keep bare soil? Well, it's too hot, too dry, too wet, too cold. Cover crops may work on your farm, but they won't work here. In almost every environment, I've heard that. Why cover crops can't work on my farm. And in every environment, I've seen farmers that are successfully doing it. So don't tell me that crap. Cover crops use moisture. They harbor pests. You know, oh God, I planted a monoculture of rye, and I got armyworms up the butt. Thanks a lot, regenerative ag. Competition with the main crop, agronomic challenges. Listen, I'm not saying that there are not agronomic challenges to all of these things. But if you wanted an easy career, you picked the wrong one. Right? And it takes people that are problem solving and that can figure this out. All right? It's really important that we do. And then passing on that knowledge is so important. Plant covers, retains the soil, it holds it in place, it provides armor. This is one of Jay Fuhrer, a good friend of mine. He'll be speaking at our August 11th field day this year. I'm looking forward to having him down again. Roots increase water infiltration, they increase that organic matter, they reduce bulk density. Many of the factors that we identify as soil health are inherently tied to plants. Okay. We've got to capture that energy because the biology feeds off of that energy. And if you don't have it, if you've got entire areas of the field season where you've got no energy coming in, then you're in trouble. So we did a project. I'm going to talk more about corn. I know it doesn't matter that much to you guys, but yeah, the same ideas are going to apply to many of your systems too. So we compared no-till cornfields that are planted with covers. Just in this case, this was the study that really got me interested in regenerative ag, right? We did this cover crop study back in 2007 and 2008. And this was kind of wacky stuff back then. And we compared it with bare soil. So now I would never use a monoculture of cover crop. That's crazy. I would only use polycultures. But at the time, this was a big step, right? This was a big step. So we did this. We established this experiment, bare soil versus cover crop residue. And then we planted cornfields, and then we infested them with this beetle's eggs. This is the corn rootworm. We have this handy-dandy corn rootworm egg infester. We can calibrate that son of a gun to 1,000 corn rootworm eggs per row foot. Wow. We wanted to test the hell out of this system. Okay? And then we came back and we measured how many pests were out there. And then we looked at the roots because the rootworm larvae, the beetle grubs, like to eat the roots, and that's the damage that they cause. And then we got down on our hands and knees and we sucked up all of the bugs that were on the soil surface. And then we took these caterpillars, they're rootworm larvae, and we put a pin through their butts, and then we stuck them out into the field, and then we'd come back after an hour and we'd see who came and was eating them. In this case, it was ants. It's a great way of measuring how much predation is going on in your fields. This was a lot of fun. We call them sentinel larvae. So we, in sort of sadistic side experiments that entomologists just do for fun, we stuck some pins through these some fly larvae, some maggots, some fishing bait, and we saw how long they would survive. And the insects can actually live. They pupate with a pin in their butts. They emerge, they close as an adult, all with a pin stuck through their butts. They live their entire lives with this pin in their butts, which reminds me of some supervisors that I've had over the years. So we went out and we looked at the number of predators that were out there. This is in the black bars are cover crops, the gray bars are bare soil. Predators per meter squared. Look at all those predators. And it was dramatically higher just by having that cover crop residue out there. And then we looked at the pests that were out there. These are the youngest of the beetle grubs, the first instars. So these are the babies, no difference. And then the second instars, these are sort of the tweens, and there was no difference. But then the oldest instar, the oldest larvae, we saw a 70% reduction in the number of larvae. And this is the most damaging stage of the pest. And then that translated to lower adult populations. What is going on there? What's happening? By planting the cover crop, you're changing the root structure of the plant, such that as those larvae get older, they need to find a better host root. And so what happens when the larvae have to leave? They get hammered by predators. So it's this 1-2 punch. And that's the way diversity works. It doesn't work in a linear fashion. It works in complex networks. We'll talk a lot about that tonight. The roots damage was also significantly reduced by the cover crop. So covers were so important in reducing pest populations. And we've seen this time and again since then. Really, really important.